In the blackened heart of the night, where every breath felt like stolen time, the base erupted into a frenzy of movement. Red warning lights slashed through the darkness, like the pulse of a wounded beast. Sirens howled, boots clanking against concrete, shouts tore through the air, blending with the distant rumble of incoming fire. Above it all, the heavens themselves seemed to burn, flashes of distant explosions painting the sky in a fiery, chaotic battle. Tonight was not a dream. Tonight was survival. From this infernal emergency rose one figure, simple, unmovable, the fearsome A-10 Thunderbolt, the very embodiment of aerial wrath. As the world teetered on the razor's edge of collapse, she answered the call, not with hesitation, but with ferocious speed, rocketing down the runway like a war cry given wings. In a single heartbeat, she became more than a pilot. She became the tip of America's spear, a force of retribution tearing into the night. This was no ordinary mission. The stakes were brutal, the threat chilling. Seasoned warriors faltered, veterans clenched their fists in dread. But Valkyrie? She soared straight into the mouth of the storm. Tonight, the battlefield would bear witness to something ancient, something unbreakable. This is not just combat. This is courage unleashed. Brace yourselves, because once she takes flight, nothing can stand against her. The clock was ticking, each second hammering down like a drum of war. The command was absolute. Launch now, or watch the battlefield slip into chaos. Steel groaned under strain as Valkyrie's A-10 Thunderbolt, the Warthog, awakened with a roar that seemed torn from the very depths of the underworld. Engines shrieked, afterburners ignited with a violent searing blast, painting the night in blinding waves of white-hot fury. Tires screeched against the battered tarmac as the beast lunged forward, unstoppable, unyielding, a missile of vengeance wrapped in titanium and grit. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, only a raw, unrelenting will to dominate the skies, or die trying. Inside that armored cockpit, a crucible of sound, fire, and tension, Valkyrie moved with surgical precision. Every flick of a switch was a declaration of war. Every breath behind that oxygen mask was a silent vow. Failure is not an option. She gave one sharp nod to the ground crew, a final salute, before the world outside blurred into streaks of fire and steel. And with the final stream of afterburners shattering the night sky, she didn't just lift off the ground. She ripped herself into history. The first minutes into hostile airspace were pure electricity, intelligence feeds crackling with grim updates. Enemy movement detected. Houthi forces were awake, armed, and waiting. A curtain of death had been drawn across the desert, a deadly gauntlet of anti-air batteries, mobile missile launchers, and machine gun nests, all synchronized to shred anything daring enough to breach their kill zone. Combat maps bled crimson under pulsing warning tones. Every heartbeat brought her closer to the jaws of annihilation. But Valkyrie didn't yield. She pushed lower, riding the ragged edge between survival and oblivion. At blistering speed, her A-10 hugged the desert floor, sand swirling in her wake like the very breath of death chasing her down. One wrong twitch, one misjudged second, and it would be over. Explosive, final, no second chances. And then, it came. A shriek of warning blared through her headset. Missile lock. Without a moment's hesitation, Valkyrie ripped the stick to the left, banking into a savage, gut-wrenching turn. Flares burst from her A-10, defiant fireflies against the darkness, each one a desperate prayer hurled into the night. In that instant, she wasn't just flying. She was surviving, clawing life from the very teeth of destruction. And then, the hammer fell. Locked onto her prey like a predator from the heavens, Valkyrie drew a line between survival and annihilation. There it was, a Houthi missile launcher, bristling with fresh munitions, its steel skin gleaming under the cruel desert stars. Her finger hovered over the trigger, the weight of decision heavier than any armor. A single breath, a single beat, and then she squeezed. The Ju-8 Avenger, a monster in its own right, answered with a roar that shook the very earth. A deafening tornado storm of molten lead ripped through the night, each shell a furious promise of destruction. The ground targets didn't stand a chance. Steel met steel, fire met fury. The launcher shuddered, then detonated in a blossom of flame and shrapnel, a brutal flower blooming in the sands of war. One launcher down, reduced to little more than a smoldering scar on the earth. But the enemy wasn't beaten. Not yet. Because in the heart of darkness, there is always another weapon loaded, another threat waiting, another fight demanding to be won. Out of the gloom, new threats emerged. Signatures flickering across Valkyrie's HUD like phantoms of death. Technical trucks bristling with mounted weapons surged forward, engines roaring, desperate to bring her down. Their plan was clear: overwhelm the sky, saturate it with steel, force her into a coffin of lead. Tracer rounds sliced upward, glowing fangs hunting their prey. The battlefield transformed into a high-speed, high-stakes dance of death, where one wrong step would end it all in a burst of flame and twisted metal. But Valkyrie didn't merely survive. She struck back with ruthless precision. Rolling her A-10 into a savage dive, she plummeted toward the enemy, threading the needle between streams of fire. Targeting reticles locked, bomb doors opened. With the cold finality of judgment, she unleashed her payload. The desert floor convulsed as precision bombs detonated with savage fury. The ground buckled, vehicles vaporized into molten wreckage. Direct hit, 2 enemy vehicles obliterated, gone in a searing heartbeat. The battlefield, once a playground of the enemy, lit up like a second sunrise. And in that blinding, furious instant, hope shifted. The tide began to turn. Panic, that invisible predator, swept across the battlefield with ruthless efficiency. Enemy fighters who once held their ground now broke ranks, scattering like leaves before a hurricane. Intercepted radio chatter crackled with desperation, clipped voices shouting, cursing, pleading. Confusion reigned. Their tightly knit lines fractured, their discipline evaporated. One chilling phrase repeated over and over, an unstoppable demon in the skies. Fear had taken root, and from that moment on, victory was no longer a question of if, only when. Inside the cockpit, Valkyrie's eyes were cold steel. She saw not enemies, but opportunities. Every fleeing figure, every abandoned vehicle was a mark waiting to be erased. She pressed the attack. Strafing runs stitched the earth with merciless precision. Each burst of the Avenger's fury carving deeper trenches into the enemy's will to fight. Every flash of her cannon was another nail driven into the coffin of resistance. Command bunkers crumbled. Weapons caches erupted into roaring fireballs. In a mere 15 minutes of unrelenting fury, an entire assault network, meticulously built, fiercely defended, was left in ruins. Valkyrie didn't just defeat them, she shattered them. With the battlefield burning behind her, Valkyrie pulled her A-10 into a brutal banking turn, a final defiant gesture against the chaos she had conquered. Pillars of smoke clawed at the sky, like the last dying screams of a broken enemy. But the mission's success did not grant her safe passage. Far from it. Enemy fire still peppered the horizon, desperate, erratic, savage. Tracer rounds clawed at the void, hunting her shadow across the desert floor. Every second of the return flight was a high-stakes gamble. One misstep, one unlucky shot, and her name would be carved into the wind forever. The sky, once a path to victory, had become a minefield of unseen death. Back at base, hearts hammered against rib cages, eyes locked onto glowing radar screens, tracking the blip that was her lifeline. The radio was a graveyard of static and strained voices. And then, through the swirling sand, through the smoke and wreckage, they saw it. The silhouette they knew by heart. The Warthog, battle-worn, scarred, smoking from the fury it had unleashed, but flying, still flying. Against every odd, against every shot fired in hatred, Valkyrie returned, not broken, not beaten, but victorious. Touchdown! The A-10 slammed onto the tarmac with a force that shook the ground. Wheels screeching, sparks flying, the very earth seeming to roar in approval. Metal strained, tires screamed, but the Warthog held, battered, bruised, but unbowed. Ground crews sprinted forward, a blur of helmets and outstretched hands, racing to meet the warrior returning from the abyss. And then, she emerged. Out of the smoke, out of the searing heat, Valkyrie climbed from her cockpit. Her flight suit was scorched, stained with the fingerprints of battle. Her visor lifted to reveal eyes that had stared death in the face and refused to blink. Her body bore the strain of war, but her spirit, untouched, unbreakable. Cheers erupted across the base, a raw, thunderous salute to one of their own. Flags snapped in the rising wind, catching the last fierce rays of a burning sunset. It wasn't just a landing, it was a homecoming, a living testament that resolve, when forged in fire, becomes unstoppable. Today, Valkyrie didn't just complete a mission. She carved a message into the very skies. America's shield does not falter, not under pressure, not against fear, not ever. And the world watched. In a world trembling under the crushing weight of uncertainty, where chaos licks at the edges of every horizon, it takes only one pilot, one act of defiance, one roaring symbol of strength to ignite the flame of hope once more. Through smoke, through fire, through the wreckage of broken ambitions, Valkyrie walked, not as a survivor, but as a warrior. Each step a silent proclamation that freedom is never granted freely. It is earned in sweat, in sacrifice, in the roar of jet engines and the rattle of cannon fire. And tonight, freedom didn't whisper. It didn't beg. It soared, blazing across the skies like a banner of defiance, too powerful to be denied. Stand with those who stand for us. Raise your voice alongside theirs. Honor the spirit that refuses to bow to fear. Hit that like button, subscribe, share this story far and wide, because the world needs to remember, real strength doesn't hide in the shadows, it takes flight. This is Eagle Takedown. Stay ready, stay strong.